Hello, and welcome to today's special report on the use of drones for locating abandoned and orphaned wells. I'm your host, Jason Sansucci, and I'm here with two experts, colleagues from Juniper Unmanned, Dave White and Christian Bruni. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Morning.
Morning. As the oil and gas industry continues to evolve, so do the challenges that it faces. One of the most pressing issues are abandoned and orphaned wells. These wells, as we'll talk about, pose a significant safety risk, hazard, damages the environment. But today, we're here to talk about a solution that is revolutionizing the way that we locate and survey these wells, drones. So first question's for you, Christian. Christian, let's define this. What are orphaned and abandoned wells, and what impacts do they have on society?
So yeah, it's a very important distinction to make between abandoned wells and orphaned wells. Typically, when a well becomes uneconomical, the operating company will properly plug and abandon the well. This is usually done by pumping a cement slurry, and this plug isolates the wellbore and protects against any fluids leaving the well into aquifers or into surface water or in any other way negatively impacting the surrounding environment. In many cases, these wells are remediated and the surface expression is reduced to the point where you can't even tell the well was even there. On the other hand, orphaned wells can pose a pretty serious environmental impact. And so orphaned wells typically happen when a company becomes incapable of properly abandoning the well. This can happen due to financial hardship. If a company goes bankrupt or something like that, there is no longer a responsible party to properly plug or to properly maintain the well. And so these wells are often, they can be hundreds of years old in certain parts of the country, back when drilling, happened more frequently and there was less documentation. And these wells are very challenging and can cause a lot of different negative impacts to water, soil, and the air and the landowners around them.
So I don't know about you, but all that sounds pretty expensive. Dave, this question's for you. What funding's available for orphaned and abandoned well, not just wells themselves, but for the identification of those wells? It sounds like we don't know where all of them are.
That's right. We don't know where a whole lot of them are. There's really three sources of funding for this project. It's actually becoming a national initiative in the United States. And so as a result, the federal government is actually taking the lead. They are putting a large number of resources into providing funding for both identification and remediation through a variety of their agencies and through programs. Primarily, they're coming through the EPA, the Department of Energy, the DOI, and then also the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. And the lion's share of the money is actually going to the states. To give you an idea of the actual amounts that are associated with each of those groups, the total infrastructure or amount that was allocated in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is about $4.7 billion. And that's set to run through 2030. So the numbers we give you are numbers that would be cumulative to be allocated to those groups over this time. So of that 4.7 billion, approximately 4.3 billion are going to the individual states for them to have remediation, identification and remediation processes take place upon their soils within their boundaries. 250 million of that has gone to the Department of the Interior. That is for the lands that DOI, the federal lands that DOI oversees, for those to be, for all of the wells that are located on their lands to be identified, quantified, and then remediated. And then about 150 million is available to tribal lands across the nation. 30 million has gone to Department of Energy, and about 2 million is set for the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. To help them as they have services that are distributed across the states to help support these remediation efforts. So, at a second level, just the states actually have, some of them have their own programs and initiatives that they have created, and they're being funded through both taxes and fees and supplemental grants for the government. And then the third source that we mentioned are the public sources. And those can also be available, those funds can be available through some property owners because they just have an issue with the abandoned wells being on their land. And so they're concerned about what that means for them, especially if they want to develop it or they have There might be an environmental impact as a result of wildlife or livestock on their land. Also, private organizations. These are NGOs and or environmentally conscious groups that are helping support those efforts to plug and abandon wells and minimize its impact on people and on wildlife. And probably the final large group in the public funding domain are companies themselves and oil companies themselves who are taking responsibility for those, especially as they pick up leases and assets that for existing in old areas that they're going back and doing secondary and tertiary recovery on. They become responsible for mitigating some of the impact of those wells on their leased lands.
Thanks, Dave. So this sounds like a complicated problem. Even identifying the wells, there's money available. We understand that there's a problem. Christian, can you tell us about what are the challenges associated with some of the traditional field methods used to identify these abandoned and orphan wells?
Yeah, definitely a big challenge. And one of the first challenges is just detection and identification. Some of these wells, especially the older orphan wells, were drilled a long time ago, back before the permitting process and some of the regulation was pretty refined. So the surface location of these wells is sometimes completely unknown. And in cases where it was documented, a lot of times these surface locations are pretty inaccurate, even off by a couple hundred feet to a mile in some cases. And so it's really important, especially when you have a limited budget with these remediation efforts, to be efficient in your operations. And so some of these areas is tough to get access. It's tough to put people into these areas and have them walk around in this difficult terrain. It's tough to get vehicle access, things like that. And so, these service companies, they need to be efficient in how they're coming in and addressing these wells and plugging them. And so drones really provide a lot of benefits in terms of safe access, keeping people safe in these investigation processes, and also in be more accurate with detection. So overall, it's important to be efficient and safe and, find these surface locations.
No, thanks, Christian. So, Dave, I want to dive in just a little bit further. So how can drone technology ensure that this funding that we just talked about can be effectively allocated?
Yeah, that's a great question. As a new and emerging technology, sometimes it's hard to understand how those apply on the ground. But I think there's at least three ways in which drone technology really significantly impacts this identification, location, and remediation of the wells and possibly monitoring afterwards. First is that drones equipped with advanced sensor and imaging technology are able to create a quick and accurate location for the abandoned wells and orphaned wells. And the thing that's important about that is that it creates a reliable set of information for decision makers. And those people can then make sure that the funding is going in the right place and that the wells that create the highest risk are dealt with first. So I think the first one is that we create a quick and accurate location for those abandoned wells. I think the second one is that drones can provide a real-time data, provide real-time data updates and information about the condition and locations of the wells in their specific site. So they allow a more efficient and more effective remediation effort, both in the planning, both in the budgeting, but also in ingress, egress, and putting people on site. It allows that funding to be used as effectively as possible, and also minimizing any hazard or risk. And that is the third issue. Is I think that drones create the ability to reduce the risk to individuals who are conducting the well searches and remediation efforts. And I think that happens in multiple ways, but the vast majority of these are in relatively remote forests with significant topography. And as a result, with people wandering around through the woods trying to identify these, you might have a site where the wellhead could be as close as 5 or 10 feet from you and you not be able to see it because of vegetation or topography or buried structure. Some of these actually have they're old enough that they actually have wood casings or wood cribbing, so they create a hazard to people on foot, or they actually have seepage and they have contaminants that have moved into the environment, and so that we have the potential for somebody being exposed to that as they come across it or walk through it. So it allows us to reduce the risk to those individuals and create safety for the workers, and it therefore will decrease, I think, overall training costs because we're able to better quantify what the condition is on the ground, and it probably decreases the total amount of safety equipment that has to be the expenditure for that because we'll know what equipment needs to be used where, when.
all wonderful information. It really sounds like the use of drones for locating and identifying abandoned and orphan wells is just truly game changing. It's safer, it's more efficient, it's more cost effective. And I'll tell you what, I'm proud that we're leading the way here at Juniper Unmanned. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. This has been a really great show. So thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you all of you for joining us for today's special report. We'll be back with you more on this topic in the future. But for now, we'll leave you with a word from our sponsor. Have a great day. Are you tired of worrying about the safety and environmental impact of orphaned and abandoned wells on your property? Well, worry no more. With drone magnetometry, you can quickly and easily detect these hidden hazards without ever having to set foot on your land. Our state-of-the-art drones are equipped with advanced magnetometers that can detect even the smallest traces of metal, allowing us to pinpoint the exact location of any hidden wells. This allows us to quickly and safely identify and address any potential issues before they become a problem. Not only is drone magnetometry fast and efficient, it's also cost-effective and non-invasive. And with our team of experienced professionals, you can trust that your property is in good hands. So why risk the safety and well-being of your land and loved ones? Contact us today and let us help you protect your property with drone magnetometry.